Hello everyone, good evening. I'm Neelam here from IC team. Uh, I think so. Let's wait for 5 more minutes for the attendees to join in. Thank you. Hi, good evening everyone. I'm Neelam from IC team. A very warm welcome to all of you to the ICE platform. And thank you for joining us today and being part of our industry knowledge journey. I will take few minutes to explain you about the e-platform and about IC. Hope you guys see my screen. So ICE platform is a digital initiative.
Your screen can't be seen yet, I think.
Okay, let me check.
Yeah, now it's good.
Okay, now it's good, right?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you for your patience. So, ICE platform is a digital initiative designed to keep the elevator and escalator industry connected beyond exhibitions. Through this platform, we bring industry experts and professionals together to share insights, technical knowledge, and market trends. These sessions happen every Tuesday, giving you a regular dose of industry knowledge and to stay informed and future ready. ICE platform is an initiative by IC India. With a strong industry support, IC has grown to become the world's fourth largest exhibition for elevators and escalators, reflecting the trust and collaboration of the entire industry. IC Ventus. IC Ventus is organizer of IC exhibitions, trade show, and industry events. We create platforms that support learning, collaboration, and business growth. Through our presence in India and Africa, IC Ventus has become a trusted bridge connecting regional markets with global opportunities. Moving on to our today's session, it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Gaurav Ghag, Director Design at TAC Consulting. Expert in vertical transportation system design with the 100 plus, sorry, 10 plus years of experience and representative of BIS ET25 Committee. We will conclude this webinar with Q&A sessions. So post your questions in the comment section.
May I suggest that we wait for another 3 minutes before, because it's not yet 4:30. So you could probably wait for another 3, 4, 5 minutes so that people can join in.
Sure, we can do that.
Gaurav could maybe start by sharing his screen in the meanwhile.
Yes.
So while we are waiting for the rest of the participants, this is Tack Matthews here. Uh, I thought I'll probably just use this opportunity to sort of elaborate as to what is happening with NBC 2025. The current version of the NBC is NBC 2016, and there has been a major exercise in revamping NBC 2016 and creating NBC 2025. Almost all the drafts are ready. And it should be going out for print. I mean, I think some officers from the government of India are reviewing it to see what needs to be done and what all are the changes that are required. So we have had a series of discussions last month. In fact, on the 5th of December, again, we had a long discussion in terms of relevance of some chapters and what needs to be done and what parts need to be fine-tuned, if any at all. Um, this has been a collaborative effort between many. I think there have been over 500 to 600 people who have been working on the revised draft of the National Building Code. It's something which I think we can be proud of. And maybe one more thing that I'd like to mention is I do not think that there is any other country in the world which has got such an elaborative national building code. Probably the closest that there is something like that would be the IBC with the Americans, which is followed in the US. But the kind of elaborative document we have, the NBC 2016, for instance, is two huge volumes. I don't know how many of you have seen it, but it's been something which is very elaborate and detailed. We have just gone ahead and just elaborated it even further. With this, I think I will. It's 4:30 already, and I'll probably hand it over to Gaurav, who can take it forward.
Hello, I'm audible.
Yes, you are
Yes,
audible.
Gaurav.
Thanks for that brief introduction about National Building Code 2025. And Nilam, thanks for the introduction. We could see some people joining in the last 3 to 4 minutes. To introduce myself again, myself Gaurav Ghag. I have been working as a vertical transportation consultant for last 10 years with TAC Consulting. I have been involved in providing solution for vertical transportation for multiple building typologies that includes the solution for double deck and twin solutions. Uh, I've been a panel member for redrafting of National Building Code 2025, particularly the elevators part. So we initiated this journey at May 2023 for drafting the National Building Code 2025, which involves 28 panel members from the vertical transportation industry. Particularly 2025 National Building Code would involve section 5C that talks about power-driven parking systems. So we had much more inputs from architects and other builders where there is no code for parking system. So the later version of 2025 would include a power-driven parking system that provides a guideline about the parking systems. Particularly this National Building Code Part A Section 5A was chaired by Mr. Tak Matthews, who is the convener of the entire forum for Part A Section 5A, and Bureau of Indian Standard represented by Mr. Abhishek Sharma. So particularly when we talk about the National Building Code 2025, Section 5A, Chapter 4, which is planning and design guidelines, which provide much more information to developers and architects, also to the vertical transportation industry. It mostly talks about the traffic analysis, the requirement of elevators for different typologies of building in terms of residential building, commercial, retail, schools, hospitals. So particularly in 2025, we have added service apartments, the requirement of elevators for service apartments, the requirement of elevators for banquets, for conventional centers, which were missing from 2016 version. So mostly talking about the traffic analysis part, there are three major parameters that is defined in the National Building Code. The first one is handling capacity to the left-hand side, which is defined as a percentage of people that the vertical transportation can handle for a period of 5 minutes, particularly about the lifts. The second parameter is an interval. So interval is a time between the two elevators, successive elevators to reach at the ground floor. It could also be called as a departure time between the elevators, the interval. The third parameter is an average waiting time, which is more user concern. After registering a call, the user needs to wait into the lobby. That's called an average waiting time. It's average because the person who is registering a call first and the person who's arriving last into the lobby could have a different waiting times. That's always as an average waiting time. So the National Building Code has defined a proper flow chart, which gives a basic understanding how the traffic calculation to be done, where it starts with the inputs from the developer in terms of population of the building, in terms of design of the building. And then we establish a pure peak analysis, giving an output of handling capacity and interval. Once the handling capacity and interval, these two parameters are met, then we proceed to simulation model. The simulation model gives an average waiting time as an output. The National Building Code has clearly mentioned that the simulation model could vary from simulator to simulator, from industry to industry, because it has its own different algorithms, the different softwares. So the only parameter that could have an apple-to-apple comparison is in terms of handling capacity and interval, because this could be calculated manually via spreadsheet if the inputs are same across the board. Particularly on simulation analysis, the National Building Code 2025 puts further clarity that the simulation has to be run for a minimum 3 intervals of 5 minutes. So the handling capacity is calculated for a period of 5 minutes, but the simulation has to be done for a longer period with the minimum interval of 5 minutes. That brings the 15-minute simulation time. The reason that we have a simulation for a longer time because it matches to the practical situation. On the screen, you can see a table to the left-hand side, the results of average waiting time, where if you do a simulation for a period of 5 minutes, the average waiting times look good. So, so if you could see, we have an arrival rate of 250 people coming in period of 5 minutes. However, the system could just transport 150 people in period of 5 minutes. So these 5 minutes are divided into 5 intervals of 1 minute. So if you see, for first minute, we have 50 people coming in. However, the system could transfer only 30 people. So there are 20 people left in that particular 1 minute. Subsequently, for the next time, again, there are 50 people coming into the lobby, and then it cumulatively adds up. So at the end of 5 minutes, we could see 100 people waiting into the lobby. That forms a queue formation in the lobby. So average waiting time looks good, about 45, 49 seconds. However, if you look into a practical scenario of a larger period of 15 minutes, the first 5 minutes we have 100 people waiting in the lobby. The next 5 minutes, again, there are arrival that happens. So already the system is busy clearing the first queue length, your waiting time starts building up. So if you look into the practical scenario of a larger period of 15 minutes, your waiting time is not 49 seconds, it is double to 111 seconds, which matches to the practical scenario. So most of the reports that we have seen, we have gone through multiple studies where the waiting time look good because that the simulation is done only for a period of 5 minutes. But when we look into actual scenarios, the waiting time is on much more higher side. The next clause in the National Building Code is regarding absenteeism. 2016 version do not mention fully about the absenteeism part. In fact, it was missing about the absenteeism. So right now we have clarified that absenteeism could be considered between 10% to 20%. This percentage is in terms of people working from home or taking holidays or sick on travel leaves. It could not happen that the office building is 100% occupied on everyday basis. So the total population could be reduced up to 20%. However, the caution that the absenteeism factor would apply only for the commercial building and not to the residential building, hotels and hospitals. This particular clause further clarifies that while we are taking absenteeism into consideration, reducing the total population by 20%, no further diversity factor should be applied that the people are arriving before the peak or after the peak. Because when you talk about the handling capacity, the National Building Code considers that the people arrive in a bell curve fashion. So the peak starts building up after a certain peak is there is a drop in the peak. So the building population should not be further reduced in terms of diversities beyond absenteeism that is considered for the building. The next clause of 4.3.1 is regarding the special building amenities. Nowadays, we could see specific amenities like cafeterias, gym, restaurant have been provided for the building. The National Building Code mentions that this particular amenities could be preferable at the lower floors, and even at the lower floors or ground or first floor, it could be connected by separate means of escalators. That reduces the load on elevators and increase the performance of elevator. However, when these amenities are provided at the mid of the building or the top of the building, there could be number of trips could be increasing, and that impacts the performance of elevators. In that case, the elevator should be designed for a higher handling capacity to accommodate these additional trips. Particularly in terms of office building, like the tall buildings, 200 to 50 meters tall, the designer go for a restaurant on the top. So that becomes a good view for the people who are visiting the restaurants. But care should be taken that when you have a restaurant at the top, there are two sets of people entering into the building, one with pure office traffic and one is a retail traffic that is going to the restaurant. This comes from a total two different background in terms of attire, in terms of intention going to the particular floors. So the National Building Code recommends to have a separate set of elevators that particularly serve the restaurant and a separate set of elevators for office purpose. This ensures that both the traffics are physically bifurcated in terms of lobbies, in terms of vertical transportation. The next part regarding the residential building, the National Building Code now clarifies that no absenteeism factor should be considered for a residential building, as the demand population is already lower side. If you look into the office building, we designed it for a 10% handling capacity against the residential building, which is designed for the 6% handling capacity. So the absenteeism factor should be limited only to the office buildings. The new clause has been introduced for service apartments and hostels. These are the upcoming projects, new projects in the service apartments and hotels. We do not have any guidelines in terms of what could be average population to be considered, though we have for the residential and commercial part. So now the guidelines is that between 2 to 3% can be considered for per apartment and per room as an input for running the analysis. This building could be considered as a high-end residential building in terms of quality of service, in terms of waiting time. However, the analysis should be done between 8% to 10% arrival. That means 8% to 10% people handle in a peak time. The next clause is 4.4.3 regarding hospitals. So there is a general guideline given by the National Building Code 2016 in terms of hospitals requirement of the stretcher elevators, but it did not talk about the evacuation of the building. So particularly the developer or the architect has to define the evacuation of the building, whether it is horizontal evacuation or vertical evacuation. When planning for a vertical evacuation, when relying on elevators for an evacuation, the 50% of the bed patient should be considered during this evacuation period, because along with the stretcher, along with the bed, these people need to be evacuated. So depending on the evacuation plan of the building, the number of elevators, the stretcher elevator should be planned for. The additional requirements that come for the hospital building is in terms of housekeeping and catering and medical waste and garbage. As far as possible, this should be treated with a different set of elevators and different lobbies, because these two are totally different for the hospital part of this. Looking in terms of hotel buildings, the National Building Code 2016 has defined the arrival rate to be captured for an hotel building. However, it did not include the average waiting time. So the newer version of 2025 would include the average waiting time, which talks about 30 to 40 seconds average waiting time for an hospital building with an interval less than 40 seconds. If we look into most of the operators guidelines, like Taj, Marriott and other operators, they also talk about the similar average waiting time less than 40 seconds. The new clause of 4.3 has been added in hotel part, particularly the hotels which are having the rooftop restaurants, bars, event spaces, casinos, should be treated with the separate lobbies, totally bifurcating from the guest of the hotel guests. This ensures that your guest elevators are not overutilized, resulting in higher waiting times and in terms of usage and security of the building. The National Building Code 2025 would also include the guidelines for banquets and conventional centers, particularly for the banquets and conventional centers. There is high mass of traffic that uses the particular elevators or escalators. The major of the traffic would be catered by escalators. However, the elevator should be planned particularly for the specially abled people. Along with the specially abled people, we have given the minimum requirements in terms of planning of for banquet and conventional center, that a minimum of 12% arrival rate should be catered to. When there are escalators provided to handle the major mass of the traffic, minimum 30% of the total capacity should be concentrated on elevators, which some users would be reluctant to use the escalators, and people with heavy attires would not prefer to use escalators. So minimum 30% of the total capacity should be diverted to elevators, and according to the analysis to be done. The minimum capacity recommended is 20 passenger, that is 2060 kg, with the fact that the banquets and convention centers, people arrive in groups. So when people arrive in groups, they would prefer not to densely occupy the elevator. So it's recommended that a minimum capacity should be 20 passenger with a minimum door width of 1000 mm. Particularly on the operation and uses of banquet and conventional center, the freight elevators must be planned to, if required. Going to the next point, clause number 4.5, which talks about retail and malls with having multiplex. Mostly the escalators are the primary source of vertical transportation for retails, like malls. But when having multiplex on the particular above levels, the night show could be considered as a main peak time where escalators are shut down. Most of the time, escalators are not in use because of the late night shows. So that could be considered as a peak time where the egress traffic is more on the multiplex, with an average waiting time less than 40 seconds. So the design basis for multiplexes is that the minimum handling capacity should be 8%. The demand population has to be 8%, the arrival rate that we call as. And out of the total number of screens, 1/3 of the screen should be catered to with a waiting time of less than 40 seconds. So it's not happening that all the 1/3 of total number of screens would be exiting at the same time. It could be with the staggered intervals that the people would be exiting the building. And the staircase factor could be considered while exiting the building. The next part, the clause is regarding the multi-level car parking. You could see multiple high-end residential buildings coming up with multiple levels of car parking. So these residential buildings are mostly during duplex flat or penthouses, where the resident population could be on lower side. However, the requirement of parking could be on a higher side. Particularly for this, it it may happen that the resident population would be lower as compared to your parking population. In that case, the designer may apply some diversity to the parking population while designing to the shuttle elevators or to the main elevators. When there are no separate shuttle elevators, the designer also should consider that the drivers would use the main elevators. The next part is regarding the schools and educational institute. The National Building Code 2025 have clearly elaborated regarding the design parameters, and the peak time during for this building could be during arrivals, before and after the lectures, tutorials, or seminars. So these buildings could be designed to a minimum demand population of 12% to 15%, the interval between 30 to 50 seconds. While looking into an educational building, the staircase factor could be on higher side. So this staircase factor can be applied for educational buildings. The next part is regarding data centers. In the last couple of years, or maybe after COVID, we have seen a major investment in India looking into data centers. So we'll be having a much more data center coming in future, and that raises the requirement of vertical transportation for the data centers. So when you look into the requirement of data center is a building which has much lower population as compared to the office building. However, they are highly dependent on the freight elevators. So the freight elevators could be of higher capacity that as per the requirement and as per the utilization. So the planning for this hoistway sizes, the users could be looking into, we could plan about the door sizes, the equipment size has to be taken inside. The door could be a center opening doors with a vertical biparting door in terms of looking into optimization of sizes. Particularly talking about the freight elevators, the basic inputs are from the developers or the architects who are designing the building. The inputs is in terms of the equipment sizes that has to be taken into a freight elevator, what is the weight of that particular requirement, and what capacity the lift has to be designed. What will be the door sizes of that particular elevator depending on the equipment that has to be taken inside. And finally, the class of loading, whether it would be class A loading, class B loading, or class C loading. Depending on these factors, the elevator could be planned into. This was the major changes that has been introduced in chapter 4, particularly related to traffic analysis and the requirement for multiple segments of the buildings. The forum is now open for any questions and discussion that we could have.
Thank you, Gaurav, for the information. We will continue to Q&A session right now. Mr. Srinivasan has one question. What are the major changes on this NBC 2025 related to elevators?
So particularly talking about the chapter 4, chapter 4 has now elaborated the requirement of elevators in terms of quality of service, that is handling capacity for multiple segments like service apartments, banquets, convention centers. Then you have hospitals, what are the particular requirement in terms of evacuation, that has been elaborated morely in terms of elevators.
Okay. So our next question is an anonymous question. Waiting time is derived by an empirical formula. How accurate is it? Is there any new formula available that is more accurate?
Like I mentioned in my earlier slides, even the National Building Code mentions that the programming, the logic for simulation could vary from simulator to simulator, and depending on that, the results could vary. So the simulation cannot be considered as a base criteria for designing a vertical transportation. However, the handling capacity and interval should be considered as a base criteria. After establishing handling capacity, the simulation could be looked into.
Okay. Our next question is from Mr. Balaji. In mixed use high rise, if there is a commercial operation on be the terrace or higher floor, separate lifts must be provided rather than combine lean hours or peak hour traffic, especially if residents are served. Does NBC speak of separating lifts for commercial floor?
Yes, and now we have defined in National Building Code 2025 clearly. Then when we have a commercial on top of the residential or on the top of the office building, there should be separate elevators provided directly accessing the rooftop. This provides two major advantages when you segregate the traffic in terms of lobbies. Second, in terms of the two segments do not enter into same elevators. So particularly when you have a restaurant having bar at the top, there could be separate set of people accessing that floor, and where vis-a-vis if you have office and where there are high-end clients, there could be two different constituent into same elevator. So that has been clearly defined in the 2025 that they has to be segregated.
Okay. Another question from Mr. Balaji again. Does destination control system help reduce waiting time, and what should be this be incorporated in residential, be high-rise buildings where peak traffic chaos is common?
So the destination control system is majorly the simulation. We apply destination control system to optimize the journey time, and along with the journey time, it optimizes the average waiting time also. The primary principle behind destination control is to reduce the number of stops. So once the number of stops are reduced, your journey time, your time to waiting is also reduced. This is much more preferable for office building because you have the morning peak of people coming into the building. For residential building, like the tall buildings which have elevators placed or staggered over the lobby, this could help in navigating the elevators. So in terms of performance, DCS, it's much more beneficial to commercial building as compared to residential. But yes, in residential, the DCS can be used.
Okay. One more question from Mr. Balaji. BMC doesn't allow more parking to be provided. Just providing more parking is also an expense to the developer. What is the suggestion in NBC?
Yeah, so this particularly applies to the high-end residential building where we have private residences also, which particularly owns 3 or 4 floors and have particular spaces for entertainment and all. So they are having a much more requirement for parking. However, this parking numbers could not be used daily, but they have the numbers, whereas the number of residents could be on the lower side. For example, it could be a 60 floors building which just 10 to 12 apartments or duplex and triplex flats.
Okay. Next question is from Mr. Harshal. Any update on the fireman evacuation lift specification?
The evacuation lift specification would not be covered in the National Building Code. This is more in terms of provision of the fire evacuation lift, in terms of capacity, the sizing of elevators. The specifications would not be covered in the National Building Code.
Okay. Next question is from Mr. Anand. Is there any specific changes for a high-rise tower?
Specification changes with respect to traffic analysis, there is not much change as compared to 2016.
Okay. Next question is from Mr. Ashok. What is the absenteeism to be considered for residential buildings?
The newer version of 2025 clearly mentioned there should not be any absenteeism considered for the residential building. With the clarification that already the demand population is lower as compared to the office building. So absenteeism is always considered for absenteeism for an office building and not for the residential building, because we are working on the lower demand population as compared to office buildings. So it doesn't make sense that we apply a low absenteeism to reduce the population and also reduce the requirement in terms of handling capacity.
Okay. Next question is from Mr. Paneer Salvin, sir. Door speed can influence transportation capacity. Is there any point in code related to this aspect?
No, the National Building Code not talk about the speed of doors, though that will impact the traffic analysis in terms of waiting times. But the code, National Building Code do not talk about the door times, because the door time could vary from supplier to supplier and from the user to user.
Okay. Our next question is from Mr. Nitesh. He's saying, hi, Gaurav. He have two questions. So first is, can you elaborate more that slide showing 5 minutes to 15 minutes stimulation versus actual scenario?
Yes, sure. Yes. So If you look into the National Building Code, it talks about handling capacity for 5 minutes. When you do a simulation for 5 minutes, for example, if you have an arrival rate of 250 people in 5 minutes, so that 250 people are arriving into the lobby. However, your system can transport only 150 people in period of 5 minutes. So your handling capacity is much less than your arrival rate. So if you look into the 5 minutes duration, which is divided into 5 minutes, each minute you have 5 people arriving into the lobby. So that means 50 people coming in period of 1 minute. In period of 5 minutes, we have 250 people coming in. So if you look into the first minute, there are 50 people arriving into the lobby. However, the system can transport only 30 people. There are 20 people waiting into the lobby. In the second minutes, again, we have 50 people coming in. You could transport only 30 people. So this adds, the 20 adds up into the next minutes. So we have now 40 people waiting into the lobby. Subsequently, this cumulative adds up, and at the end of 5 minutes, we have 100 people waiting into the lobby. So if you just look into the 5 minute scenario, it will give a good scenario because the waiting time would be 49.3 seconds. However, if you go into scenario of 15 minutes, the first 5 minutes, when we talk about 100 people waiting into the lobby, at the 6th minute, you have 40 people adding to your first 100 people, and then you could just transport 30 people. Again, you have 110 people waiting into the lobby in the 6th minute. If you go to the end of this 5 minutes duration, at the 10th minute, you would have 150 people waiting into the lobby. So at the 11th minute, this 150 people would add, and then again we have 30 people arriving into the lobby because it's a bell curve. After the peak, it starts dropping. So we have 30 people arriving into the lobby. Your system is designed for 30 people. It will take 30 people, but still there are 150 people waiting from the previous 5 minutes duration. Because of this cumulative thing, the average waiting time subsequently shoots. So when you look into lower handling capacity vis-a-vis the required handling capacity, the initial 5 minutes could be having a good waiting time. But if you look into the broader scale, the average waiting time could be actually double the waiting time of 5 minutes.
Okay. His second question is, can we consider staircase factors for residential and commercial building lower floors?
Yes, staircase factor could be considered for the residential building depending on the use. So if you have the residential floors just starting from level 1 could be considered, but if you have multiple podiums in between the amenity levels and the residential, the staircase factor could be on lower side.
Okay. Our next question is from Mr. Ashok Kumar. DCS for 2-car or 3-car groups is helpful.
Particularly for the commercial building beyond 3-car group, the DCS is helpful.
Okay. Our next question is from Mr. Srinivasan, sir. Is there any update on the communication equipment on elevator for hearing aid users?
Hearing?
Aid users.
No, this particular requirement will not be covered in the National Building Code. As I mentioned, the National Building Code is particularly referred by architects and developers. It will just give the basic guidelines about the elevator performance and the requirement of elevators.
Okay. Our next question is from Mr. Balaji. When will new chapter 8 be released by NBC?
New chapter 8?
Yes.
Possibly early next year.
Okay. Our next question is from Mr. Khan. What should be the population considered for residential building traffic analysis, either 50-50 or any different ratio?
So if you look into the National Building Code 2016, there's a particular chart which mentions about the population to be considered for the residential building, which is further divided into a low-end residential building, mid-end residential, and high-end residential building. It has specifically mentioned about the 2 BHK, 3 BHK, and 4 BHK apartment for each segments of the building. So that's what 2016 has already addressed that query.
Okay. Our next question is from Mr. Dinesh. Why only 50% evacuation is considering in a hospital building as per new NBC 2025? Is there any specific reason?
So like I mentioned, the developer or the architect has to first define the evacuation strategy of the building, whether it would be an horizontal evacuation or vertical evacuation, where the elevators would be actually used. Because in case of fire, you are not supposed to use the elevators. However, when you talk about the hospital building, there could be some bedridden patient who has to be evacuated along with the bed. That's why only 50% of the total bed is considered for the evacuation. But in normal use, I mean, you're not supposed to use the elevator, you're supposed to use the staircase.
Okay. Our last question is from Mr. Sajid. Can we have DCS for shorter buildings like a B plus G plus 16?
That depends on the number of elevators as well and the type of building, whether it's a commercial building for 16 floors. Beyond 3 car and beyond 3 car group, DCS is always helpful for a commercial building.
Okay. I think so
Understanding that the basic requirement of handling capacity is met.
Okay. That's all. So that's all with our questions. Is there any
Thank
other
you.
question?
I would like to
I
thank
can-
all the audience for your valuable time, taking your time and hearing about the session. Thanks. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, attendees, for your time. And also thank you, Gaurav, for your time and such a informative session. I would like to inform our attendees that because of Christmas and New Year, our webinar will start directly on January, which is from next year, which is on 6th January. So thank you once again for joining us today. We wish you Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Looking forward to connecting with you soon again. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.